welcome to the Hit Squad. Chad Range alongside Jesse Finney. As you can see, we're both in red for the Red October. Cardinals looking good.
Absolutely. Still wearing the same jersey 3-4 weeks in a row here, boys. Come on, man. I'm getting tired of wearing the same shirt.
I'm getting tired of smelling him wearing the same shirt. So we're going to be breaking down this segment brought to you by Shamrock Fighting Championships, home of St. Louis MMA. We want to see you on the Facebook. That's Facebook.com/Hit Squad 101 ESPN, Twitter handle @Hit Squad 101 ESPN. So some big news obviously coming up this weekend. Cain Vasquez taking on Junior Dos Santos. It's the rubber match between those two. That's happening in Houston, UFC 166. And we're going to bring in the insider for ESPN, Josh Gross, and we're going to be breaking down some questions as well as kind of some things that have happened in the past. Josh, are you there with us?
I am here. How are you?
Very good, very good. As you said, we're up 3-1. The Cardinals.
Yeah, we're doing really well. How are you in LA there, buddy?
We live to see another day. I was telling a friend, I was like, oh, well, there's always tomorrow. I was like, wait, no, now I sound like a Cubs fan. This is no good.
Okay, you're back on our good side now.
Yeah, you're in the good graces now. Nice work, Josh. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, obviously an exciting matchup happening this weekend, UFC 166 in Houston. The big guys, the rubber match for Dos Santos and Cain Vasquez. Break that one down for us, and what are your thoughts and feelings on that?
Oh, well, I think it's clearly the two best heavyweights in the world. There's no doubt about that. Junior Dos Santos, he won the title. We showed his power in the first time that they met on Fox. That was a memorable occasion for the UFC and for mixed martial arts. And then Cain came back in the rematch, and I think asserted his dominance in the way that we know that he can compete. Just forward pressure, relentless, never fatiguing. And, I expect it to be a lot more like the second fight than the first fight, I'll tell you. And I do think Velasquez retains the title and takes the trilogy 2-1. I certainly think they're not beyond fighting a fourth time, maybe a fifth time. But for now, two heavyweights in the primes of their career who know each other very well, whose styles match up to make a competitive, intriguing fight. I mean, this is a big fight.
Wow, interesting. Well, I tell you what, I'm excited to see this fight as well. What's your thoughts on Daniel Cormier and Roy Nelson there going in?
A lot of thoughts. One, I wish Daniel Cormier was staying at heavyweight. There's all the talk of him moving down to light heavyweight. He said win or lose, he's going to go down to 205. I'm just intrigued by a guy of his physical stature and ability fighting at heavyweight. He's unlike a lot of the monsters we see there. I understand why he wants to move over to 205. He wants to fight John Jones and everything. But if he goes out and hammers Roy Nelson, which I think he will, because Nelson gets hit way too much, and Cormier actually has one of the better striking percentages in the UFC, especially for heavyweights. And I think it's sort of, hopefully we'll see him back up in the heavyweight division because he has a lot of things to accomplish there, is my thought about it. But I don't think Nelson really presents much of a challenge for him. Roy has the right hand. He's got a tough chin. But at a certain point, the chin will go away, and the right hand just won't land. He's too predictable. Daniel Cormier is too fast for him. And Cormier is as light as he's ever been. He'll probably walk into the fight about 225. So I think it'll be a good night for DC.
And what do you think about DC against John Jones at 205?
I don't know. I mean, the weight cut is the major question for me. You remember, Daniel Cormier, his kidney shut down during an Olympic bid from weight cutting. I mean, he made a life of weight cutting, and then he wanted to get away from that, which is why he focused on the heavyweight division. So if he can do that, if he can come down in weight in a real way, I think he's absolutely a good enough wrestler to handle Jones. The speed will be the real issue. Whether his speed translates like it does at heavyweight down to light heavyweight, I'm not so sure. And Jones' length, of course, is always a factor. But that's an intriguing fight. It's a fight a lot of people want to see. And I'm not saying that John Jones is going to lose to Glover Teixeira, but there's no guarantee that he wins that fight either. So, all the planning from Cormier, who knows how it translates and how it plays out. But, I think we'll find out next year in 2014 whether that's a reality or not.
For UFC 166, what other intriguing matchups do you have? And do you have maybe your sleeper pick of the night, maybe an upset that maybe no one's thinking about?
The upset one may be a little bit tougher. I was surprised to see that Sean Jordan was a favorite over Gabriel Gonzaga. So if you're going to go an upset there, then I would say just on the odds alone, probably Gonzaga over Jordan. Two fights stand out to me as ones that people should pay attention to outside of the main event. I like the Diego Sanchez-Gilbert Melendez fight a lot. Just you look at their records and their histories. I mean, to me, this stacks up is a fight that's going to be a war.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, unless Sanchez has slipped so much that he just can't bring it anymore. But I haven't seen that. He was really good against Ellenberger in terms of persevering and coming back and making it a fight at the end. And he seems to be in a fight of the night every time. And Melendez comes in with a point to prove after losing a fight on the cards to Benson Henderson, losing the UFC championship also in that respect. So he's got to make a statement. And then the flyweights, Daryl Montague, who's making his UFC debut, is the only unranked flyweight that wasn't in the UFC. He's there now fighting John Dodson. I like this fight a lot. I think it'll be a tactical, technical contest, really high-paced, of course, with the 125-pounders. But if you're asking which fights I'm looking forward to most, it's probably those two outside the main event.
Well, and I noticed I had to hear you say Gilbert Melendez lost on the scorecards, okay, to Benson Henderson. What was your thoughts on going backwards? Because that fight still to this day drives me a little crazy. What were your thoughts on that fight overall, besides the scorecards?
I thought it was a good competitive fight. You know, Benson Henderson did his thing. I think the guy has gotten away from improvising. He was such a good improvisational fighter, Ben Henderson. He's too predictable now. And he gets in his pattern, his movements. Not enough offense from him was the bottom line. And I think we saw that, too, against Anthony Pettis. I think he's a great fighter, and he could win the championship again one day, but he's not a guy that really captivated fans. People weren't into Benson Henderson the way that they have been other champions. I thought Melendez won. It was a tight fight, very competitive. Gil was not at his best. I think there's more to be had from him, and if he was at his best, I think he beats Henderson more often than not. So it was a good fight. It wasn't the best fight I'd ever seen, but I do think Melendez probably deserved to win. A lot of people feel that way.
And while we're living in retrospect, I gotta say, the Anderson-Weidman fight, the first one, obviously we have the second one coming up. We're all excited to see that. Jesse and I talked about it, and I brought it up, and I wasn't even going to bring it up, but I had read one of your articles, and it spurred me to say, and neither one of us believes that was a fixed fight, but there was something fishy, quote unquote. I just kind of want you to touch on that, your thoughts and feelings of Anderson Silva versus Chris Weidman the first time, and obviously, preview the upcoming matchup.
Yeah, well, I never implied that there was anything fishy in terms of a fix or there was something underhanded at play. Just Anderson's antics in the cage, I think, put off a lot of people. It cost him the fight. But then you have to remember this guy always fought on the edge. He always did things that nobody else did because he could. And he's a tightrope walker, and he just fell off the tightrope. I mean, he leaned too far back. He made a mistake. The best in the world can do it. We've seen it. We've seen the best in mixed martial arts lose before. It was stunning to see the way that Anderson did. I think the fact that he got knocked out, people say, well, that's impossible. Anderson Silva can't get knocked out. That's crazy. So it was a situation that I think stunned a lot of people, and it's a great way to cap 2013, which has been a tremendous year for the UFC and for mixed martial arts. And I think it's a fight that is, as we get past the GSP Johnny Hendricks contest, no matter who wins that one, I think for about a month and a half, all we're going to do is break down this Weidman-Silva rematch, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm expecting a great contest.
Who's the sleeper in 2014 that no one's talking about right now as a fighter up and coming?
No one's talking. You mean like a guy in the UFC who's like on the rise?
A guy that's in the UFC that's on the rise.
Yeah, since we're talking heavyweights, I'd say probably Travis Browne. It's not that no one's talking about Travis Browne, but I think there was the fight to Antonio Silva may have dissuaded a lot of people from thinking, he's something, but he was injured in the middle of that fight. I kind of take that result with a grain of salt. He is very gifted physically, extremely fast for the heavyweight division, tall and athletic, and I think if he gets to the point technically where I think he's headed, he can compete with Junior Dos Santos and Cain Velasquez. His fight against Josh Barnett's going to be very intriguing. I'm excited for that one. But I'll say Travis Browne. Maybe he's not enough of a sleeper for you, but that's the guy who popped in my head.
And I do want to ask, what are your thoughts of, the UFC, and obviously with the 166, Daniel Cormier, this will be his final fight as heavyweight, and we all know that it's because he fights out of the same camp as Cain. What is your thought on fighters fighting, against I don't know if you want to call it their friends, but someone out of the same camp? I mean, in a way, you know, as a fan, you're losing a great fight because that is something people would like. I think I'd love to see Cormier.
Go watch him up in San Jose then.
You know,
I mean, we both have two different perspectives. We completely disagree on this subject. But go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you there.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
Look, I think at the end it's a business. The fights that people want to see, that the sport demands, have to take place. And I understand the UFC promotional argument and wanting these guys to get in the cage. Rory McDonald against GSP, DC against Cain Velasquez, on and on. You've heard of these fights over the years, and they just never happened because of conflicts in the gym. Rashad Evans left Jackson's because he figured he'd have to fight John Jones one day, and he did. So I think the fighters have to recognize, like Mark Munoz and Lyoto Machida have, they're good friends. They're fighting here in a week or two. It was sort of thrown in the laps. You got to answer the call. And, I understand why athletes wouldn't want to do it in the UFC, why mixed martial artists wouldn't want to compete against one another. But I've heard so many wrestlers tell me, yeah, I have no problem fighting this guy. He's my teammate. I wrestle against all my teammates. I think there is an element, because of the striking, because of the dangers associated with MMA, that it's different than a wrestling match, obviously. But the competition remains the same. The sporting aspect remains the same. And if you don't need to have ill will towards your opponent to compete, then I think you can step in the guys that you know pretty well. I mean, it happens all the time. What I don't want is for fights that have to happen because these two guys are meeting. That all signs point to this is where the roads are taking them. That they have to converge at some point. To lose out on those fights, that's not good for anybody. And so I think you have to find a compromise, and at the end, the compromise usually means that they get in the cage together.
I disagree.
I agree.
He does.
100%.
And I actually agree that I think it's good to put the guys together. But until you get to this point where DC and probably Cain will be, then you cross that bridge. But until you get to there, there's no need to actually put the guys together in the same gym. When you get to a title contention, yes, I think they should fight, or they should
100%.
split up.
Yeah,
but until you get to number one, number two, why even trying to make them fight each other? And then if that's the way, but hey, man, I mean, we don't operate the UFC. They've obviously made some smart moves in the past, and we can't really second guess them when it comes to business.
No, and I'm with you on that, and the fighters have to stand up for themselves. I mean,
right.
The fighters cede so much control in terms of matchmaking or the directions of their careers to the promoters. It's not just UFC, Bellator as well. That they're the ones that end up responsible for a lot of the way that this goes down. If they stand up for themselves and say, yeah, I'll fight. I mean, I think Rory McDonald would fight GSP if it was for the championship. I think that would happen. So, but, there's no incentive, there's no point to doing it in a bout that doesn't have those stakes on the line, especially if they're not being compensated in a better way, which most of the time they're not. They're just fighting under the terms of their deal. So I think, under the right situation, when the roads meet and it feels like it has to happen, I think the fighters have to step up and recognize that they have to deliver for their careers and for their fans and for the UFC. And the UFC has to recognize that they're putting these guys in a very difficult position. These are their friends and training partners, and it has to be the right circumstances to make them fight one another. And yeah, it's a fine line, but I guess I'm with both of you guys on that.
Okay, well, we're pretty much out of time here, but you know what? We're going to go over. So he goes,
okay.
I want to talk about the Dodgers and the Cardinals. What are your thoughts coming up on today's game?
We're out of time.
No! Is that what you're saying? You're out of time? Being the Dodgers, you're out of time? Or are you talking you're out of time?
Look, I think Greinke and Kershaw can bring us to Game 7. That's my hope. And then, you got one game for all the marbles. We'll see what happens. But, Cardinals are a great team and a great franchise. And I'm still haunted by 85 and Needham Fewer. And we got to get you guys sometime. So trust me, I know. I understand.
Hey, just giving you trouble. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, Josh. Thank you so much, man. Great to have you, as always.
All right, thanks, guys.
Good deal. Yeah, that's interesting stuff. We're going to be tackling, obviously, the UFC 166 with our predictions right after the break. You're watching 101sports.com.